This is Dr. Tom Lewis with Real Health Clinics, and I want to present to you the topic that Alzheimer's is actually a vascular disease, a disease of our circulatory system. And the proof really is that the approach in the standard of care has been a brain-only approach, that it's a disease of the death of neurons, and we need to treat and improve neuronal health and the health of our brain in that respect, but it's completely disregarding the connectivity of the brain to the rest of our system, the holistic approach. So there's really significant hope outside the brain. So I'd like you to consider this: from heart attack, stroke, microbleeds, and microinfarcts, vascular dementia, and Alzheimer's. What I want to show you today is that these are all on the continuum of the same disease, a vascular disease, whereas heart attack affects very large vessels and Alzheimer's affects the smallest vessels we have in our bodies called capillaries. So here's a basic look at our vascular physiology from the heart on up, and we can see large vessels going to smaller and smaller vessels. And the largest vessel, the aorta, is about the size of your thumb, a very large vessel indeed. And when one of these large vessels occludes or is otherwise blocked off, we'll either suffer angina or actually have a heart attack. Now on the next slide, what we see is these large vessels start branching out into smaller and smaller vessels. So when we have still a fairly large vessel in the brain that gets blocked off, we get a stroke. And the stroke will affect a fairly large level of circulation, which affects the nervous tissue of the brain. And we may see motor skill loss or even memory loss in the case of a stroke. Now, as we get into even smaller vessels, we see a condition called mini strokes or microinfarcts. So if you have an MRI, your doctor may say you have a mini stroke or microinfarcts, but really a lot of people with dementia have many microinfarcts already, and they weren't detectable because they affect a small area of the brain, but as you get more and more of these microinfarcts, it affects more of the brain and actually can start having an impact on memory and other cognitive functions. So down to the next level, below the microinfarcts, is in the smaller vasculature, we have what's known as vascular dementia. But once again, this is not something that just occurs. We have to have many of these small vessels becoming diseased. And believe me, when you have a large vessel that's diseased, it's a continuum throughout the entire vasculature, so the smaller vessels and even smaller vessels are also diseased, and when they get to the point where they're highly diseased, then you start losing circulation and nourishment to the nervous tissue in the brain. Now, when we get down to the capillaries, the finest structures, which we really can't even see on this diagram, that is Alzheimer's disease. And once again, just like with vascular dementia, this is a slowly progressing disease because this entire network doesn't just shut down suddenly. We lose vessel after vessel, capillary after capillary, until it impacts the health of the neurons that these vessels are impacting. So that's why we now understand that this is a vascular disease. So on the next slide, so if we look at blood vessel size, that kind of gives us context and an explanation for why neurology and even anybody in the standard of care is not detecting this disease, because they're using MRI as an example. So a heart attack, very large vessel, smaller vessel. At vascular dementia, schematically compared to a capillary, which is tied to Alzheimer's, this is the size difference. The main technique that medicine uses to detect this disease in the brain is MRI. MRI can see vessels that are this large associated with vascular dementia, but MRI cannot see Alzheimer's. An MRI is 10 times not accurate enough to detect and even see capillaries, so it's totally missing the cause of the disease. So in summary, Alzheimer's is a vascular disease. It's on that continuum from heart attack, stroke, infarcts, vascular dementia, then Alzheimer's. It slowly progresses as capillaries continue to die off over time. MRI cannot detect the underlying cause. Capillaries are 10 times smaller than the detection limit of MRI. Alzheimer's is a vascular disease, and it makes sense. All these diseases of aging, like Alzheimer's, are diseases of a sick component in a sick body. In the case of Alzheimer's, it's a sick brain in a sick body, and that sickness is generally vascular in nature. My name is Dr. Tom Lewis. I'm with Real Health Clinics. Thank you very much.